Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the ranking member. Thank you, gentlemen, for your willingness to come here to help the committee with its work. I tend to look at things from the worker perspective. I was a welder and an iron worker down at the Quincy shipyard in the Boston area, down in Quincy, Massachusetts, for a while, until that shipyard closed down because of foreign competition. Some foreign Ex-Im banks supported shipbuilding in their countries and put us out of business. And I worked at the General Motors plant in Framingham, Massachusetts, and they closed that plant down and a couple of others and moved them over to Mexico. So I tend to see the effects of what other countries are doing. I just had an opportunity to travel to South Korea and also to Japan. And I make it a point of during my travels, and I was in both those countries for several days, I try to look for American products to see how we're doing in Korea, in South Korea, and in Japan. We were in South Korea for several days. It's a major industrialized country, big highways, millions of cars. There for 3 days, stuck in plenty of traffic. I saw 2 U.S. cars out of hundreds of thousands of cars in South Korea. The only 2 cars I saw, the one I was driving in from the U.S. Embassy and the one behind me that had the U.S. Embassy security team for my detail. That was it. I was in Japan, the same thing. Looked, like nobody's business, trying to find a U.S. car. Nothing. So it just bothers me to no end that the Korean Ex-Im Bank and the Japanese Ex-Im banks are picking winners and losers. They're picking winners and losers, and they're picking Korean winners, South Korean winners, and Japanese winners. And we're criticizing our Ex-Im bank because you're picking American winners. And I have a real problem with what's going to happen here once America gets off the field, once we surrender and say, okay, China, you can push Chinese manufacturing, and we're going to tie our hands behind our back. And what will this do? What will this do to creating U.S. jobs? And, I have to say that I hope and understand that your job is to create American jobs. And there's been some criticism here today of the way you're going about it, but I do think it is in the best interest of the American worker to be in the game, to be trying to push American companies. And I've said before, your support for Boeing doesn't support necessarily Massachusetts jobs in my district. But it's okay if you're putting Americans to work in Washington State. God bless you for doing that. And any other American company that you help. I don't think we can be parochial at that level. And can you just tell me what your ideas about what's going to happen if we walk off the playing field and leave it to these foreign export-import banks to drive the creation of manufacturing jobs and other jobs around the world? Mr. Hochberg.
Well, thank you for that. We take very seriously our jobs mandate. We're about U.S. jobs and not really about U.S. companies. When a U.S. company or a company makes goods in America, we support it. As I've said before, 164,000 jobs last year alone. And even when you make the comment about Boeing, I suspect there are many, many Boeing suppliers in the state of Massachusetts. So every time a Boeing plane is delivered to a foreign customer, many small businesses benefit. I was just in Erie, Pennsylvania, a town that without the exports from GE Locomotive would be a very quiet town with not very many good jobs. And I met with a number of the small businesses that actually supply machine parts, tool and die parts that go into the locomotives, go into those engines. One company I met, ISM, 175 employees, a full 15% of their work is tied to GE exports. So they're very much tied to the state of those larger companies making those exports. But I think what we're putting in jeopardy is 164,000 jobs. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of families in their homes. That's a lot of families who are relying on these export jobs and the financing we do to make sure that export happens. And again, 90% of those companies are small businesses, some in the Chairman's district itself.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman.